So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and today we have a Dwarven civil war between the kingdoms of Erebor and of Khazad-dûm here in the hills, and I'm not actually sure what this map is. I believe it's been in the game for a long time, to be honest, but I certainly haven't seen it in 0.97, so let's see if we can't keep some map freshness going on. And as for the matchup between Erebor and Khazad-dûm, Khazad-dûm of the two probably have the stronger of the infantry, which is what you more closely associate with the dwarves. Certainly from a, they just in general they tend to have units of a similar tier which is just a little bit stronger all around from an infantry standpoint, so it certainly makes them better at just being the sort of engaging in that classic sort of dwarven warfare. But from an Erebor perspective, I would certainly say that they have stronger supporting units, particularly their cavalry of course, but also their crossbows. I won't be complaining too much about the crossbows today, but I would be extremely surprised if Erebor were able to pull out a victory here without leaning quite heavily upon their crossbows, because it's not something Khazad-dûm can really answer to too easily, because it's not as if they can get their cavalry into them, because Erebor have got the superior cavalry, so they can easily block that. And just in general, the dwarves are pretty difficult to charge down with cavalry if they keep their spears and pikes close. But we'll start off with Tundra's Fox, who sent me the battle replay, who's going to be playing as one of the two Erebor armies. He does have a unit of Ironfoot crossbows out in front, just in case the enemy were in range, I'm sure. Combination of Ironfoot warriors and Ironfoot pikes making up a pretty sturdy looking front line here. So obviously a combination of line infantry and of pikemen is going to be pretty good when it comes to dealing a bit of damage with those warriors. And also poking out just in front over here, we do have some Erebor legionaries as well, so the higher tier of line infantry that Erebor can bring to the field as well. It is worth saying as well that higher tier units like that can be very useful for Erebor, because they do lack a bit of morale in comparison to Khazad-dûm, but I really don't feel as though that's the stumbling block which many people seem to think it is for Erebor, because to be honest with you, Erebor, it's easier to make up for a little bit of a morale shortfall with buffing units than it is to completely lack certain kinds of units. Let me just put it that way. We have some Ironfoot spears just in behind here as well, just in case, I'm sure. And then we've got a couple of Axe Guard of Erebor as well, so a nice bit of armour piercing to boot. And then just in behind we have yet more very strong units, including the mighty Dragon Slayers hidden here in the heather plants. And then also some Blacklock Engineers as well, so some body piercing into the bargain, so a lot of very high tier units as you expect from the dwarves. They are capable of bringing a lot of high tier units, both of the factions on display here today, and also some Ironfoot war goats hiding in the trees at the back, presumably for defensive purposes. We also have the Sons of Durin, so another elite infantry unit of course, and then his ally sort of shoring up his flank we have Captain Gervais. I would be surprised if we saw too much in the way of differences. We got more crossbows on the front line, but interestingly enough we do have a bit of a difference. Combination of Ironfoot warriors and Ironfoot halberds on this flank, and the armour piercing will be useful, although it does leave them open to being held at range by the Khazad-dûm pikemen if they have been brought in large numbers. Crossbows, legionaries, Sons of Durin, more Axe Guard of Erebor. Of course, it's unsurprising to see so many Axe Guard because the AP will be very useful in this matchup. Blacklocks, Dragon Slayers, overall a pretty similar look and feel to this army, although he does have some Ironfoot Axe Throwers as well, who of course will be very useful for dealing with any phalanx units that Khazad-dûm have brought to the field. And to be fair, Khazad-dûm do have a significant terrain advantage, albeit that does put them in the view of the crossbows, but it does also mean that the superior range on their Orc Hunters here should come into play. Engsfit's playing as the first of these two Khazad-dûm armies as well. Very similar looking phalanx over here as well, only made up of sentries of Khazad-dûm and warriors of Khazad-dûm. As I said, in comparison to the Ironfoots, they are probably just a little bit stronger, which is nice for Khazad-dûm. It means that they can rely on having a bit of an advantage there. Some upgraded 3rd Legion, so once again they're able to bring these Legion units Khazad-dûm in force, which does make it quite difficult for Erebor to keep up on an overall quality level, even if they can bring largely the same amount of really high tier elite units. 4th Legion Shield Guard, we also have some Hammers of Gundabad over on this flank deploying their stakes, locked morale of course, some mercenary crossbows out on the flank, so they do technically have crossbows, but to be honest with you, their limited range means they're very easy to zone out if you're paying attention. More hammers, some miners up here on the slopes as well, and then at the back we have some 4th Legion, in addition to the mighty guards of Khazad-dûm with 3 hit points, another little area in which Khazad-dûm can claim to have a bit of an advantage over their brethren in terms of their infantry strength, and of course the Mithril Guard, very similar to the Dragon Slayers. And then finally, I'm not sure we're going to be able to see most of this army to be honest with you, but we do have Rules 1 who has got some sentries here, some miners, and then his general is going to be in the guards of Khazad-dûm, so a very, very solid unit to put your general in. The rest of them of course will be hidden in the trees up here. Some cav out on the flank as well from Captain Gervais, some more Iron Foot war goes. But without further ado, let's begin. And obviously rules with most of his army hidden in the trees up here, so Khazad-dûm certainly have the better position here, and I would imagine that if Erebor do intend to move forward, they will try to isolate Enk's-Fitz first and foremost. Try and keep them at bay. Comes to Khazad-dûm. Hammers of Good and the Bad are going to pull back a little bit, so I would imagine that here in the early game we're going to see a fair amount of posturing from both sides, because of course the dwarves rather slow and plodding armies overall, and really the battle can be won or lost here by either team by just how the engagement is first set up. The engagement itself may take a little while to grind out a result, but I would imagine that based on the way the lines fall, we should be able to make a pretty solid prediction as to who's going to win this. And it looks as though actually Khazad-dûm are going to be falling further back up the hill, so making further use of their terrain. This of course means that Erebor not too keen on moving forward just yet, although there may have been pre-established rules in this fight, I'm not entirely sure. But certainly it's all downhill from this side of the map, so it is going to be fairly difficult I think for Erebor, but Erebor of course can lean on their crossbows quite heavily, and the terrain in a funny kind of way may very well help them here, because while it will tire their units out as they march up it, and while they're in combat while fighting uphill against the enemy, it does give them a clear shot with their crossbows. They will not have to arc their shots, and that could be devastating for the Khazad-dûm front line. And if indeed Erebor are to win this, like I said, I would imagine that it would be built heavily on the back of those kinds of units, especially the Blacklock Engineers. But I think I will make a little bit of a cut here actually, because it does look as though we're going to be seeing a pretty lengthy period of manoeuvring before the battle is actually joined. So the first volleys getting off here from the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm on the front line, although I do believe Tundra's Fox will probably end up pulling back here, and indeed he is. The Iron Foot crossbows though don't have too much to fear in this situation, I would think, because of course with that Dwarven armour and with those shields on the back of the Iron Foot crossbows, they probably won't take too many losses too quickly. The Orc Hunters are a very good archer, to be honest with you. I believe they have 6 missile damage, which puts them on par with sort of basic Elven units of a similar type. So they can do a fair amount of damage, but what I would say is that arrows of this type are probably not going to do too much damage too quickly to a unit as heavily armoured and shielded as the Iron Foot crossbows. The Iron Foot crossbows can't afford to just hang around and take this sort of damage, however. If they are going to get involved in a skirmish fight with the Orc Hunters, they need to do it properly and get in range so that they can have some return volleys off. But from an Erebor perspective, I would also be cautious of doing that, because while the Iron Foot crossbows can engage in that sort of thing, just like the Parvis crossbows of old from Medieval 2, there is a case for saying you don't really want to use your bolts on the Orc Hunters here. You want to save it for the Khazad-dûm infantry. And the bolts are being loose now. And they're going to try and fire right up this unit here, this unit of Orc Hunters, which is shuffling its position to be more up on this hill over here so it can fire down into the advancing forces. You can see now that it is very much turning into a bit of a manoeuvring fest here, neither side wanting to commit too much of their resources too early, which is definitely understandable, because if Erebor charge forward unthinkingly, that is where their slightly lower morale could bite them, and large sections of their army, particularly their Iron Foot units, could go running in the face of these slightly stronger Khazad-dûm units, and then that's something you can't really recover from. The dominoes will start to fall. But equally, Khazad-dûm can't really afford to charge down the hill, because they will be met with a withering volley, well, set of volleys really, from the Iron Foot crossbowmen and of course from the Blacklock Engineers. Iron Foot shuffling their way into place as well. Dragon Slayers there at Mithrin. Sons of Durin over here also. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these Iron Foot halberds perform, because in theory the AP should be incredibly useful against Khazad-dûm as a force. But I would also suggest that it's relatively easy for Khazad-dûm to counteract this with their sentries of Khazad-dûm, but especially something like the First Legion. The First Legion pikes would be able to very quickly dispense with the Iron Foot halberds because of their increased stats. Not entirely sure what that lag was all about there. Dragon Slayer should also be a good choice because of that AP. But of course the Blacklock Engineers are also one of those units which will be very, very feared by the Khazad-dûm opposition here. Don't think this is going to come down to cavalry too much though. In a weird kind of way, I think Khazad-dûm have actually kind of got the advantage here with their mercenary crossbowmen, because they can kite the Ironfoot Wargoats, but of course they're not going to charge in while there are still trees. And I feel as though the fact that large sections of both armies are probably hidden from the other team is probably part of what's engendering this much passivity so far. A lot of caution. Obviously they know that Rules is just lying in wait at the top of that heavily forested hill, so they're not going to charge right up into the jaws of his army. But I do kind of feel as though the emphasis is kind of on Erebor to move forward here. This is an RP battle, it's worth saying, so the armies were picked beforehand, but if they don't have any long-range tools to prise Khazad-dûm off their hill, that is ultimately on them. You know, you need to manage your faction to deal with this kind of situation, I feel like, if you don't want to have to be faced with a hill like this and having to charge into it. But yeah, I do feel as though it's on Erebor here. They do have the tools to get Khazad-dûm off the hill, but they need to move in, and they need to do so with a lot of their force quite quickly, I think. But again, I think I need to make another cut here because it's quite clear that neither side is going to be too eager to rush into anything too severe at this stage in proceedings. And here we go with a bit of an ambush. You can see that they were trying to maneuver their way around this position over here, but immediately you can see that a huge arrow storm has happened over on this flank from Rules 1 with his Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm. The Ironfoot Wargoats are over here, but immediately Captain Gervais, and trying the softly approach, trying to sort of go around the hill in this manner, has just led to them getting slapped in the face, really, because the warriors of Khazad-dûm are going to follow them, and they could catch the Ironfoot crossbows here, and they do need to be bailed out, I think, by the Ironfoot Wargoats. They're going to try and escape now, but they could receive some covering fire from their archers on top of the hill, which is probably what they're hoping to accomplish here. You can see the warriors of Khazad-dûm getting caught up on a few things. They are going to get charged ultimately, but then they should receive some counterfire, and in the end that wasn't actually a very good charge. It didn't really follow through on it, and the archer's going to be able to shoot these dwarven riders in the back, and that was a very, very quick and savage volley that was brought forth here from both the mercenary crossbowmen of Rules and from the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm. So quick that I missed it. Figures, right? Nothing happened for 10,000 frames, then all of a sudden a bunch of stuff did. Over here, meanwhile, 4th Legion Shield Guard trying to get away, or trying to chase down the Ironfoot Wargoats, I should say. The Ironfoot Wargoats causing a bit of chaos in and amongst the Khazad-dûm ranks, but nothing too severe. But ultimately, it is now a more level playing field. Erebor have got a bit of a hill that they can utilise to their advantage here, but ultimately, it's still going to be very much Khazad-dûm on the high ground. Over on this side with Rules making very good use there of his skirmishers. Mounted crossbows with a lot of base damage that they have, and the Orc Hunters also damaging for archers of this type, and even the more heavily armoured forces of Erebor struggling there. And it is worth saying the Ironfoot Wargoats, as heavily armoured as they may be, they do lack a shield, they're not multiple HP, so under that much fire it's not surprising that we're seeing this many corpses strewn about the field. And it is also worth saying that fairly diverse array of troops there, including Axe Guard, Erebor Legionaries dead on the floor there as well, so fairly wide array of troops there that Rules managed to catch in his net. We shall see if this good fortune continues for them. There's still a decent amount of Wargoats here though, so Captain Gervais shouldn't be too put off from using them aggressively, although with 2 units of mercenary crossbows, maybe he feels as though he can only really take down or tie up so many of these skirmishers at once. But I mean, at this point, Rules, I think, seeing the fact that Erebor are doing nothing but back off here, he feels emboldened to send his archers a little bit further forward and potentially take some pot shots into the Erebor army, and that is indeed what he is going to be doing. And that's what I'm surprised about here, because a little bit of battlefield awareness, if he's got 2 units of mercenary crossbows, 2 units of Orc Hunters, chances are he's obviously got a lot more infantry units hiding, but chances are he doesn't have a huge infantry force, not the kind that you would usually associate with Khazad-dûm, so Erebor maybe taking the more passive approach here is not the right way to go about things. If they stay at arm's length for too long, manpower bled too much, and you can see here that Rules is immediately trying to go after units which are unshielded, and these Ironfoot pikes are sticking out at the back of those Erebor Legionaries on the front, so the shielding tactic, which is very common, is not actually going to come into too much of an effect here, as the archers are going to be going after this front line from behind. So again, very good battlefield awareness there, as you can see, And yeah, I mean, Erebor, they're being hemmed in a little bit here, and considering they were the ones who I were imagining going to be taking the more aggressive stance in this battle, a bit of a role reversal here. I mean, Erebor do have a lot of infantry still at their disposal, but I don't know. I'm not really feeling that what they're doing at the moment is all that effective, to be honest with you. This is where Rules could learn to live to regret a little bit, I think, his brashness as the Ironfoot crossbows, you know, seeing the fact that Khazad-dûm are getting closer, they can now open up with both barrels, so to speak. This is going to be a lot of damage coming at them quite quickly. But again, maybe Rules is not too concerned about losing these Orc Hunters in the way that he is, and now he's able to start shooting some of these other units. I'm not really sure what this lag is all about, to be honest with you. It's not an overly demanding battle, you'd have to say. Mercenary crossbowmen thinking of coming in, but then pulling back, because of course the foot crossbowmen do have superior range. So it would be foolhardy really to go after the Ironfoots in this manner. Those are 3 units of Ironfoot crossbows. No, it's got to be only 2, surely. Looked like from the way they were moving it was 3, but no, not looking like it. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm coming in here, starting to wrap around a little bit, and Erebor the ones on the back foot, and they really are leaning on their crossbows here. This is the reason why Erebor are really taking this tactic. I think the fact that they can just sort of keep falling back and draw Khazad-dûm in, and then as soon as Khazad-dûm get in range of the crossbows, they can hit them with that huge stopping power that crossbows have. And I'm not going to complain about crossbows here by any means. Considering their relative strength, it is a very valid tactic to do. But it does, of course, mean that you're pretty much in a constant state of pulling back and hoping that the enemy charge in to your crossbows. At this point, though, Rules could be able here to draw Khazad-dûm into a bit of a trap. These warriors should be able to hold back this force for a little while at the very least. As my Discord beeps, I forgot to sign off Discord, which that's usually something I am quite good at doing. Alas, this time I was not. You can see over here Engsfit's sending his Orc Guns of Khazad-dûm into a position where he can also send for some support. And then you can see some sentries of Khazad-dûm, Dwarven miners, so now all of these ranged units should be coming into play to deal with this advancing Erebor blob. Combination of Ironfoot warriors and Ironfoot halberds on the front line. I mean, to be fair, these warriors of Khazad-dûm, they are already wavering. There's only 1 unit here basically going up against the full might of this Erebor infantry column, so there's only so much punishment they're going to be able to withstand. And this is honestly what they should be doing, because Rules' army, just based on the amount of skirmishers he has, probably doesn't have the same level of infantry power that is across the way. And even if they do, the crossbows will be more useful when you're up close and personal in this manner. I don't know who's sending me all these messages, but I'm not appreciating it at the moment. It's probably just someone sending me a replay, and I'm not really being too grateful here, but yeah. Sons of Durin on the front line, so all of these elite units performing very, very nicely. Smashing through those warriors very, very quickly, and of course this is where Engsfitz may need to wrap around and support his ally, but the problem with that is that Tundra's Fox has set up a very nice defensive line. If Captain Gervais continues to push through, and continues to carry this momentum through the army of Rules, not really fancying the chances of Khazad-dûm here. And Rules does tend to do very well with this sort of layered skirmish approach, where he bleeds the enemy over time, but now that a bit of aggression is coming his way, can he respond to that? Does he have the army composition to be able to respond to that, would be my question. Here though, Ironfoot halberds moving with Ironfoot warriors in tandem, very, very nicely done. And now Tundra's Foxy just needs to move across and prevent any reinforcements from coming to this avenue of attack, and things should start going quite well for Erebor, especially with the supports coming in from the back of all the crossbows. You can see here that crossbows already getting into position, more armour-piercing units in the Axe Guard of Erebor now charging forward, and the Orc Hunters are starting to rout off. Dwarven miners revealing themselves from the trees as well, Ironfoot crossbows over on the flank there from Captain Gervais. You can see here that Rules really sending forward a lot more men at this point. Dwarven miners being backed up by warriors of Khazad-dûm, trying to go for the gap that was in between the army of Tundra and of Captain Gervais. But it's an easy enough matter to plug that gap, especially with a unit as higher quality as the Erebor Legionaries. Dwarven miners' victory is a distinct possibility. Not often you'll see that against an elite fellow Dwarven infantry line. The Ironfoot crossbows Going to try and get some volleys off, albeit only into Dwarven miners, so this is probably more of a distraction than anything else, but it does need to be answered, because otherwise the crossbows and the backlines will be compromised, even if it is for a relatively simplistic unit. Cross come the Axe Guard as well. Still Erebor continuing to advance forward, the Axe Guard at the core, but I think at this point Captain Gervais is maybe a little bit guilty of getting a little bit strung out. He needs to keep his force together, really keep that clenched fist, as it were, to keep smashing through Khazad-dûm's lines, because if you start to skimp on your front line, Khazad-dûm will chew you up. And speaking of which, Rules is now starting to commit some very serious units in the shape of the 1st Legion Pikes. His sentries of Khazad-dûm are also coming in here, so they should be able to hold all of those Ironfoot halberds at arm's length. It's just going to be a case of whether or not the sheer numbers work in favour of Erebor. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm over here still not too eager to move in to the very well prepared phalanx of Tundra's Fox. Here you can see that some Dwarven miners also coming forward, but they're being battered back by that phalanx. But the Erebor legionaries outnumbered here by Khazad-dûm, and this thin part of the line could be a bit of a problem here. The mercenary crossmen starting to go around the flank, so I think they're going after the Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin as well, and even if they miss, they're going to hit Axe Guard of Erebor, so that's going to be a lot of very good kills that they're going to get there. Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm rushing over to try and get some flanking fire as well, enfilading fire. Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm still trying to fire their crossbows in, then they will be able to kill a lot of these mercenary crossmen off very, very quickly. Even against very basic archers, they don't tend to stand up too well, so against Dwarven crossbows that's going to be even less the case. But these Dwarven miners won't last too much longer. The Dragon Slayers are going to translate themselves over to this fight over here. Erebor victory is a distinct possibility once again, so presumably because of all the supporting units they have, they're starting to do a good thing here. But here in the middle, where the 1st Legion and the Guards of Khazad-dûm are, I would be quite worried for Erebor, because they don't have anything of too high a quality there, and most of their line appears to be breaking. Here, where the Erebor line was looking a little bit beleaguered, they're starting to open up with their Blacklock Engineers, which is going to do a lot of damage, but they're not too far away, so Khazad-dûm could close with them in melee quite quickly. And while Tundra's Fox has got a very nice long phalanx, Khazad-dûm are really concentrating their force over here, and they're now trying to rush through with 4th Legion and with Hammers of Gundabad. So this is where Khazad-dûm's main strength is, right in between the two enemy armies, and they're going to try and force their way in and then wrap up both sides of the Erebor opposition. And they do need to do that sooner rather than later, I think. And it is going to be sooner rather than later. The brass of the Hammers of Gundabad, making them easy to pick out. Ironfoot Axe Throwers also just in behind. They should be pretty good in this situation, to be honest with you. There's plenty of targets they can go after as long as they stay out of melee. But the problem is Erebor are just sort of trying to commit more units to try and hold their line together. I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to, though. They've got Sons of Durin. Blacklock Engineers have pulled out their hammers and square shields, and now a real clash of the Titans here in the middle. Guards of Khazad-dûm facing off against the Dragon Slayers, but the key difference here is that Khazad-dûm have got support and the Erebor elite unit does not. The mounted crossbows still doing their thing. At this point the Blacklock Engineers poking out from the side, and they're going right through this big blob of enemy Dwarven infantry. And to be fair, I mean, Khazad-dûm, their assault in the middle here, if it fizzles out, they could be a bit of trouble, because Tundra's Fox still has a lot of spare units. Captain Gervais' army is still under the cosh a little bit, really. He's still trying to use all of his crossbows, I think, to shut down those Merc crossbows. He's having some success, although the fact they're still alive may suggest otherwise. I'm still amazed those miners are still there. They routed just now after a charge in there, but they've been going for a long time, so Rules can afford to be quite pleased with them. The sentries are starting to lose ground against the Erebor legionaries and the Ironfoot halberds, just through sheer numbers here. Portions of Rules' front line is starting to collapse, but it is a concentration of force strategy, so you kind of expect that to happen. It's just whether or not this particular strategy is going to work here. Mercenary crossbows bombarding the enemy with their handheld crossbows as well. Projectiles going back and forth from both sides, but it's going to be Erebor who are going to have the more potent projectiles here, particularly from the Blacklock Engineers. We've already seen them do a lot of work here in the middle, and Khazad-dûm's front line is now starting to fizzle out. They do still have those Hammers of Gundabad sort of deep in and amongst the enemy territory, but at this point they don't have any support. Tundra's Fox's general has fallen, and that is around here somewhere. Orc Hunters are charging into the breach to try and support this position. Meteor Guard are in behind, more Hammers of Gundabad, and more reinforcements are needed, I think. Because at this point the tide is turning against Khazad-dûm. All of these reinforcements from Tundra's Fox, he's siphoning them off from his reserves in the backfield, and they are now coming to bail out Captain Gervais, really, who has fought very well, but of course when you're fighting uphill into a Khazad-dûm front line, your army is always going to have a bit of a shelf life, really. Ironfoot crossbows in here. Victory is a distinct possibility for the Axe Guard of Erebor, as you would expect, against another unit of miners. Not fighting men are the miners, but they're doing their best here. Serving rules well. All these crossbow bolts scything through these Khazad-dûm men, but the Hammers of Gundabad should be able to make it here into the skirmish line of Erebor. But there's a lot of Erebor men, or dwarves I should say, to hack their way through for Khazad-dûm. The guards of Khazad-dûm at this point, they have lost manpower. The Meteor Guard are in here, but the axe throwers, you know, the axe throwers, they'll do pretty well against the hammers because they're unshielded, but shielded units can mitigate quite a lot of damage from axe throwers, especially for really tough shielded units like these ones. So I don't think Khazad-dûm will be too concerned about that, although it will still be damage that they can scarcely afford to take at this point. Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin defeat is a distinct possibility even when they're backed up by Axe Guard, as a second unit of guards of Khazad-dûm. And this is usually where Dwarven elite units will really start to pay dividends for you. But both sides of the dwarves, so both of them are going to have those advantages. Crossbow bolts going in, and this is where Erebor are going to need to start to focus down the right targets. If they don't, then they're going to be in real trouble and they're going to start to get forced back. Meteor Guard, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Hacking and slashing their way through their Dwarven brethren with their AP, as you would expect, and looks like the tide is turning back in the favour of Khazad-dûm once again as they continue to charge down the hill. Hammers of Gundabad, 1st Legion pikes, some Erebor legionaries that were way in the backfield are going to be returning to the fight now, but I think it may already be too late. I mean, Erebor's front line is starting to fall apart here with the added additions, if that makes any sense, of the Hammers of Gundabad coming in another wave. Has really done a lot of damage to Erebor here, and I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to withstand this sort of punishment for much longer. Axe Guard of Erebor starting to fight their way through all of the basic units like the Orc Hunters. Still, Tundra's Fox is having to keep up a bit of a presence over here to prevent being completely surrounded by Khazad-dûm, and that means a lot of these units are just having to stand here while their brethren fight and struggle to the death over here. 3rd Legion Infantry getting in amongst the Blacklocks. This will stop them from firing, but the Blacklocks should be stronger than the 3rd Legion in melee, so they should still be able to win that. Still a few War Goats hovering around. A unit of 117 Erebor legionaries coming over here to support the very battered unit of 38, as well as some Blacklocks. So here, a little pocket of Khazad-dûm infantry has been completely surrounded by good Erebor units. The problem is, I'm feeling more and more that Erebor are lacking the strength to deal with the guards of Khazad-dûm and the Meteor Guard. In come the Ironfoot War Goats. A nice charge might do something to help that. I don't think they were going for them though, which is unfortunate because now they're going to get caught on the Meteor Guard and probably get butchered. Meanwhile, Khazad-dûm sort of repositioning themselves to the high ground once again, which should allow Tundra's Fox to redeploy all of those reserve units he had on that front line, which means Ironfoot Pikes and Ironfoot Warriors are suddenly going to come flooding back over to this side of the field en masse. But of course it does mean that Khazad-dûm are also simply repositioning their men. They're going to reposition them on the hill, so once again still trying to use the geography to their advantage. The balance of forces is evenly matched, which I find hard to believe because they're just being poked to death by pikemen. Once again, Tundra's Fox is going to try and get his Blacklocks into a devastating position, and if they can do that, they do still have every chance of pulling this fight out of the bag. Defeat seems certain for the 4th Legion Shield Guard. As you would expect, they're completely cut off and surrounded here. Support could be forthcoming, but Khazad-dûm are going to have to get moving pretty quickly. There's still mercenary crossbowmen firing. They may be depleted, but this damage is still going to be very, very handy. Erebor Legionaries' defeat seems certain. Still doing their thing against the Hammers. Still the Meteor Guard, still mulching their way through. More and more of Erebor's manpower And the Meteor Guard and the Guards of Khazad-dûm are two very, very strong units, and there's still a lot of Hammers of Gundabad left as well, which is a lot of AP. Khazad-dûm in general, they seem to just have conserved their quality a little bit better. Erebor still have quite a bit that they can bring to bear, but most of it is just basic Ironfoot units. They do still have a few units of quality here and there, such as the Dragon Slayers, and the Blacklocks, of course. A few decisive volleys from them could turn this battle right around. But we shall see. Mercenary Crossmen are wavering. Getting a little bit too close to the action, of course. Mercenaries not very well known for their resolute morale. A lot of Khazad-dûm reinforcements coming in here to try and bail out these Hammers of Gundabad. They're going to have to fight their way through Erebor Legionaries and Axguard of Erebor, but they should be able to do it. There's Meteor Guard in there, after all, as well as a lot of 3rd Legion as well. It's a very chaotic fight at this point in time. We are coming into the final stages of it now. Still quite a lot of Ironfoot warriors. Not going to be too well suited to fight off against the Hammers of Gundabad, mind you. Those big Warhammers, excellent at cracking through armour, no matter the make. Blacklock Engineers trying to get into a position to utilise their ammunition, I think, but they're having to be careful here because Engspitz is doing a pretty good job of interrupting them with his mercenary crossbowmen. They shouldn't last too much longer, especially not with pikes right there. But still, any time they can delay the Blacklock Engineers and allow their infantry to do the business is a victory for Khazad-dûm. Still a few units of pikes back here. That could be a bit of a worry for Khazad-dûm. They don't seem to have too many of their own pikes left at this point. I'd imagine the 1st Legion were the target of a lot of Erebor's attentions with their skirmishers. 3rd Legion Infantry, Meteor Guard fighting side by side. The Erebor Legionaries will try their best here, but against this kind of opposition they are outmatched. Meteor Guard being pulled off at this point, maybe trying to go after the sides of the Ironfoot pikemen. Victory seems certain for the Orc Hunters. It's a very closely fought thing. I mean, the Blacklocks, they are firing again. What are they going after, though? Do they have a good target? I mean, Erebor are going to win over here, I think. There's a lot of pikes. But interestingly enough, I think their own pikes actually got in the way of their Blacklocks there, so they're having to shoot over them into the top of the Guards of Khazad-dûm, and it may be here that just the sheer quantity of Erebor here might be enough to see them over the line. Unless Rules can sort of pull another unit out from nowhere that he had hidden in the trees, it would not be unheard of. Ironfoot Pike's going to come forth yet again. Blacklocks, I mean, from a pure quality standpoint, it's going to be difficult for Erebor, but they still have those Blacklocks, although they just got charged. Most unfortunate. Very, very nice charge there from Rules with a unit which is not really very well known for a great charge, but if they can shut down those Blacklocks, they can then maybe rely on their quality to see them over the line. Guards of Khazad-dûm may very well be able to do it. There's a lot of Ironfoot to try and cut their way through, but I mean, to be fair, they're going to win over here. Still a lot of 3rd Legion, and from a pure melee standpoint, I just do not believe Erebor have got what it takes to bring down the Guards of Khazad-dûm. The Meteor Guard are pretty battered at this point, only 18 of them. There's 30 Dragon Slayers. I don't know, it's still close, and we're right here in the final phases of the fight, and I'm still not too convinced of who's going to win this. It could come down to morale even, which is probably bad news for Erebor. Especially after I spent the whole time saying morale is easier to deal with, but that's one of the Khazad-dûm armies completely gone, I think. Which just leaves Engspitz fighting to the last man, and I think Erebor, they're just about going to be able to see this over the line, I think. Yeah, the Guards of Khazad-dûm are starting to fall away pretty heavily now, and that unit of Dragon Slayers was, I think, key. If they didn't have those, I would have worried that they wouldn't have had the quality to see this one through. As it is, though, it looks as though they are going to be able to do it. Who'd have thunk it? 3rd Legion Infantry starting to rout. Still some Erebor legionaries as well, like the 3rd Legion were trying to come across in support, but Erebor are going to win. Very closely fought. Indeed. It was a very closely fought battle, I must say. Everyone played pretty well, I would say, and it was a slow one to get going, but obviously when it's this sort of battle, it's obviously going to be fairly heavily reliant on the manoeuvring there. And it could be that Khazad-dûm maybe just didn't have the infantry to do the decisive damage to Erebor when they decided to go for that concentration of force in that little gap between the two Erebor armies. Maybe they just didn't have enough manpower to really send that one over the line in terms of their infantry. Which sounds weird for Khazad-dûm, but they did seem to have quite a lot of archers, obviously a lot of mercenary crossbowmen as well, which takes up army slots which could have otherwise been occupied by other units of infantry. But most of the time that still would have worked out for Khazad-dûm from an infantry standpoint, but they were facing off against fellow dwarves who can certainly hold their own in melee. And of course they were attacking into crossbows and blacklocks, which is never going to be an easy thing to do. So what got the kills for Captain Gervais? A lot of good numbers actually here up against the Khazad-dûm army. The Ironfoot Wargoats doing very well, so several good charges. I would suggest most of them were on miners though, because it seemed like they were going after them and trying to break them, but even so, still not a bad return. Lots of units breaking 100 as well. And then Tundra's Fox also. 334 on his Dragon Slayers. They did very, very well. MVP certainly, because without their strength in the late game, almost certainly Erebor's army would not have been able to kill the guards of Khazad-dûm and the Meteor Guard. And then another unit breaking 200 as well, Axe Guard of Erebor, and then a lot of units breaking 100 as well. So well fought and well won by Erebor in this Dwarven Civil War, especially considering the terrain did not look too favourable to them at the start, but they did well. Compositions maybe also were well chosen by Erebor in the end. But yeah, again, like I said, it's a bit of a weird time for me at the moment. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what's going to be happening in the near future. It's kind of everything's a little bit up in the air at the moment, but I will still be doing regular content nonetheless. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.